The Honourable Peter Dutton MP was first elected to the House of Representatives as the member for Dixon in Queensland. He was appointed a minister in 2004 and has undertaken a number of significant ministerial portfolios, including Revenue and Assistant Treasurer, Health, Immigration and Border Protection and Home Affairs. He was appointed Defence Minister on the 30th of March 2021, where he now has to grapple with major procurement decisions made by his predecessors 6 or 7 iterations previously. Mr Dutton has a Bachelor of Business and has served as a Queensland Police Officer for 9 years and 8 years as a Company Director before entering Parliament. Please welcome the Defence Minister, the Honourable Peter Dutton MP. Thank you, Minister.
Well, Paul, thank you very much. Well, good morning, ladies and gentlemen. It's a great pleasure to be with you today. I want to say thank you very much to Brendan O'Connor for being here as well. But I want to say thanks to the Defence Reserve Association for the opportunity to speak to you today. And I want to acknowledge your National President, Paul Irving, your National Deputy President, Ian Florworth, the Association's office bearers who represent the interests of the services and our reserves in each state and territory, the associations, the staff, the sponsors, patron Jack Smorgan. I also want to acknowledge and thank the many companies, businesses and sectors across the country whose civilian workforces include reservists. It's their flexibility and support as employers which allows Defence to have a reserve capability. But most importantly, I want to express my deep gratitude to all Australians who have served and continue to serve in our Defence Force, including as reserves. Ladies and gentlemen, consider some of the finest qualities which define our national character. Looking out for our fellow Australians, giving back to the nation which has given us so much, pride in service and sacrifice. We see these qualities in Australians who volunteer across all walks of life. We see them too in the men and women who sign up for our Navy, Army and Air Force reserves. Those Australians who, despite living busy lives, make an effort to contribute to the nation through military service. Since becoming the Minister for Defence, my priority has been to ensure that Defence focuses on its core businesses, that we're not focusing on woke or quasi-political Canberra indulgences. In the modern world and what might be on the horizon, our core business is keeping Australia safe and secure, deterring actions against our nation's interests, including the most egregious forms of coercion and aggression, and being prepared to respond to the direct contingencies should they be realised. That's what the ADF is doing. It is getting on with its core business. Our core business is more important now than at any time since the Second World War. We're facing a tougher world and a more uncertain world. And it's playing out in our region, the Indo-Pacific, where the world is now starting to focus. To be blunt, there is only one game in town, and that, as we know, is the Chinese Communist Party. Regrettably, we live in times in which the boundaries between competition and conflict are becoming increasingly blurred. The cyber realm, economics, trade, and digital media are but some areas being used as coercive battering rams, or indeed being weaponised in new ways. Consequently, the arenas of tension have expanded, making the prospect of military conflict less remote than in the past, especially as a result of miscalculation or indeed misunderstanding. Now, I note that your conference theme, Preparing for War, the exclamation mark included, is a very important topic. So let me make 3 important points. Point 1, it's important to have a nuanced discussion with the Australian public about the strategic challenges in our region. A discussion that neither catastrophises nor trivialises those challenges. Point 2 is that as things stand today, we are not on the edge of a precipice, and we should also be under no apprehension as to the goal of our country, our allies, our partners, our friends in the region. We want to preserve the necessary peace and stability which has and will continue to drive humanity forward for the benefit of all. That said, the increasingly coercive activities of the CCP should be cause for renewed vigilance, for injecting new energy into defence preparedness, so we are poised and ready for conventional and unconventional contingencies. I'm determined to make this the objective of my priority during my time, short or long, in this portfolio, to refocus the ADF on our core business. It means taking care of our people better than we have in the past, to making sure that we provide support to them, both in service and post-preparation. It means improving our sovereign capabilities, fighting and our sustainability. It means improving acquisition, and it means doing it in a way that is timely and that sees value for money. At the core of this preparedness and readiness stand our reserves. So let me now touch on how our reserves will support the ADF's preparedness and readiness as we contend with the future challenges. In making these comments, I want to emphasise that the ADF is a single entity made up of many people. Indeed, we need to concentrate, as Paul pointed out in his earlier remarks, the great contribution of the reserves. In relation to the ADF's preparedness and the role that they rightly play, what the government will expect from them, what roles and tasks they might perform, and when, as part of the mobilisation process, would they be deployed? Now, these are good questions, but of course, they're also complex questions. The answers will differ depending on the circumstances we encounter as a nation. As I mentioned, it's foreseeable that we could face conventional or unconventional contingencies, even a combination of both. In the event of a conventional conflict, reserves would likely be employed in a similar way as they have been in the past, complementing and supplementing the efforts of our permanent personnel as part of integrated teams. But let's take a hypothetical grey zone scenario, a major cyber attack on an Australian city by a state-based actor, an attack of such severity that the city's electricity grid and water systems are hacked into and shut off literally for days. One that sees perturbed citizens queue at petrol stations and supermarkets. One in which there's an increase in looting. In this hypothetical scenario, it's not unforeseeable, of course, that the ADF would be asked to support their state colleagues, as it has done for the bushfires and the pandemic in the last year alone. Here, our reserves, alongside the permanent personnel, might be asked to assist police, help restore power, support border management, or transport and distribute supplies to the affected populace. Let's stretch the hypothetical situation a little bit further. Imagine we have to respond to a cyber attack, maritime trade disruption, and a regional conventional conflict concurrently. Our military planners would obviously prioritise their resources, deploying personnel where they needed them most and where they would have the greatest effect. But my principal point is this: preparedness and readiness requires defence to adapt to any contingency, regardless of the source, nature, or scale, whether that's as a consequence of a geostrategic development, terrorism, regional natural disaster, or a national emergency, whether that's responding to activities that concern conflict, competition, or cooperation between nations. This does require flexibility, both in mindset and in practice. And so, to the expectations that we place on our reserves, we need to be mindful of the roles that they might perform and when they might be mobilised. And it is why Defence, as we know, is committed to maintaining a well-trained and highly professional volunteer force. Importantly, it is neither here nor there whether those personnel assigned to an operation are permanent or part-time. What matters most from our nation's perspective is the ADF response time. From a total or integrated force perspective, some tasks will be better suited to reserves. As we know, the activities of reserves also help alleviate pressures on the permanent personnel. As outlined in the Force Structure Plan released last year, Defence is developing a mobilisation plan, and the plan will increase the ADF's ability to support a range of scenarios. My department is considering the roles Defence could play as part of whole of government efforts for various contingencies during a national response. This includes exploring the potential options for the use of reserves, cognizant of their skills and the situations which might require their mobilisation. In this endeavour, I very much welcome the Defence Reserve Association's continued consultation in developing the mobilisation plan. Later today, ADF speakers will provide an update on the plan, but to echo the sentiments of the Vice CDF, Vice Admiral David Johnston, preparedness is potency. And preparedness and mobilisation planning also requires Defence to hoover up insights from sectors and institutions from society, from industry, from business, and from academia. Let me conclude with a few remarks about reserves as they concern the three services specifically. Army has implemented, as you will be aware, a future-ready workforce portfolio. You'll hear more about this from other Defence representatives during today's conference. But in essence, it's focused on ensuring Army's integrated part-time and full-time workforce can address future challenges, both as a service and within the ADF joint force. In terms of attracting and retaining skilled people for part-time roles, Army is progressing several initiatives. It's developing industry partnerships like with BHP, with a view to shared employment arrangements and much more. It's making it easier for people to move between part-time and full-time positions. And while part-time members continue to train and to work alongside full-time colleagues in integrated units, the second division, as you know, will assume responsibility for domestic operations across our country. With Defence's tighter regional focus, the maritime domain has become even more important. The government's financial commitment to this domain has increased, and it will increase significantly into the future. Navy is focused on generating and maintaining a task group presence at sea, including with our allies and partners. We've had in-depth discussions, as you know, with the United States about enhancing that presence, and that is important for our strategic outlook and for the way in which we prepare for the future. But sustaining maritime operations and activities includes the use of part-time personnel, no question. Like Army, Navy continues to review the posture, organisation and depth of its reserves, and skilled reserves, I think, serve several functions. They provide a surge capacity as operational reliefs for our ships, submarines, our squadrons and our teams. They support the fleet through engineering and logistics roles, as well as providing catering, security, medical, legal and port services. And they're embedded in capability delivery and sustainment roles. To support the growth of its reserves and to retain those skills, Navy is planning to deliberately increase the number of personnel undertaking part-time service, including establishing new pathways to ab initio entry to the Navy. The workforce planning goal is a permanent to reserve ratio of 4:1. Now, as you know, HMAS Moreton in Brisbane has prototyped a support force model to increase the employment of reserves for domestic and regional assistance. Plans to expand this model around the country are under development. And as members of the DRA well know, Air Force's reserves are primarily former full-time members who have chosen to continue their service in a part-time or casual manner. And there'll be many individual reasons for that decision. Like Army and Navy, Air Force's workforce is a mix of permanent and reserve personnel, an integrated workforce within a service supporting the ADF Joint Force. With the emergence of new and disruptive technologies, and this is the most important point that I wanted to make in relation to Air Force, they are changing. They're changing the nature of warfare and our approach to it. And Air Force is developing functions in new areas like cyber, space, mechatronics, data analytics, the Internet of Things, and system designs. These areas will be essential for future air combat mastery, and they will require reservists from non-traditional recruitment spheres who can bring new, unique skills to Air Force. Through the 2020 Air Force strategy, the service is working to attract skills in many of these areas, and in so doing, delivering air and space and a very powerful contribution to the ADF Joint Force. Ladies and gentlemen, I might leave it there so that we have time for some questions. But from my formal remarks, I hope you appreciate these points. We are living in times of strategic uncertainty and elevated tensions. Australians understand that, and the world now is focusing its attention on the Indo-Pacific. We need to make sure that the ADF is preparing for conventional and unconventional contingencies. Should the worst eventualities come to fruition, strength will be needed in how defence responds. Whether our servicemen and women are working full-time or part-time, that quality resides within each of them. It resides within the ADF. That's something Australians recognise, appreciate and honour. And it's something our adversaries have understood over the period of your service, in those who came before you and in those who serve now and into the future. So I hope I've left some time for the Q&A period after Brendan's speech. But thank you very much again, Paul, for the opportunity to be with you this morning. And I wish you very well for the rest of your deliberation.